And you'll know right away there's something very wrong. Okay, thank you all for being here, first of all. Did we already put hands together for Frank? My name's Chris. I kind of run this little deal. And very excited to bring these two together for, I don't know, I haven't met yet.
Just in passing.
Yes. I've heard really terrible things.
Well,
And you're
nothing but smart.
Now settle down, please. We gotta have some cohesive narrative to this tale, because there is a tale to be told. I don't know if you remember this, Frank, but actually a little while ago, the story from Trump a million times about there reading the book for maybe something years. At that point, eventually, Can everyone hear Lisa? Because I have a microphone.
Oh, put the microphone on, yeah, for sure.
Testing, that's better, right?
Yeah.
So I think what might be a fun place to start is for Frank to say how he got involved with something weird, like way back. You know, how he even heard about something weird. It's a really interesting story.
Well, Mike sold bootleg tapes, and it was the only place you can get stuff at the time, like Abbott Costello, go to Mars, things like that. And I called up and wanted to place an order, and it was very friendly on the phone until he said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Frank Allen," and he just, hold on. And he gave the phone to, it wasn't him, it was somebody else.
Oh no,
Dan.
Yeah, Dan.
Yeah. And I said to him, you know, like a year later, why'd you do it? He goes, I was intimidated. You know, well, so anyway. And then he came to New York, we got friendly, started speaking on the phone a lot. And it was when this movie lab thing came up, Dave Friedman had a list of films that he said were...
Everyone knows Dave Friedman.
Yeah. When a lab goes out of business, there's a protocol they have to take. They have to contact all the producers and or distributors and tell them, you know, your property is here, and if you don't claim it in, 6 months or something, you get rid of it. Well, these are all, you know, sex films. Who knows who owns it? Certainly all the distributors are gone. So there was a bunch of orphaned material and abandoned that was going to become landfill. So Dave Freeman told us about this, and he gave us this great list of stuff. It was like 35 titles. And it turns out we found nothing on that list.
That's right.
Nothing. But Mike wanted me to go down with Peter because we at least had some sense of what we were looking at, what the cans are, and especially to figure out which ones are not public, you know, are in public domain. And he flew in, and we went there on a Friday night, and I think Mike's original idea was, here's the scam. Let me start with that. No one owned these films anymore. They were just in a basement in the bottom, just sitting and rotting. But the custodial staff had access to them. So they were the ones that you had to pay off. They $200, and you could get the negative, you know, the films. And they will say to you, "Oh, you own this?" You go, "Yeah." You go, "Okay." So Mike was planning on spending. He wanted to get, I think, 5 films, and he was taking $1,000. And we went in there, and when we saw the titles, we were just like, "Oh my God, oh my God!" And then Mike was staying at my place, and all of a sudden he said, "No, I need to get 10 titles now." And he was staying up all night making lists of which, no, change it, no. He couldn't figure out which 10 to do. The next day we went there, and as we're taking the cab down there, I said, "What titles he go?" He goes, I don't know. But he was great, because he knew, he knew how to buy and sell. And he walked into the place, and there were a couple of custodians, and he says to him, "Which one's the head custodian?" The guy says, "I am." And Mike said, "Okay, let me, over here." And he said to the guy, "Look, I know what the scam is. You guys are hoping to get $100 and you split it between you." The guy says, "Yeah." He says, "I'll give you $5,000 in cash right now if you let us take what we want and walk away." And the guy goes, Well, here's how to work the elevator. Well, that was the other thing. We pulled so much stuff that we knew if we didn't get it out of there that Saturday and come back Sunday, you know, the price is going to triple. So he called up Arthur Morowitz. We got a truck there, it was loaded up, and that was that. And even then, and I was grabbing stuff that...
Okay, so what was like the first title you guys played?
Oh, I don't remember.
I don't remember, but it was like, we were just going nuts at seeing this stuff.
Curious stuff.
Oh, yeah, I
Monster
screamed at
Camp
that.
Sunshine.
Yeah, the Monster Camp Sunshine, I was up on a ladder. And when I saw the title of that, I said, Mike, get over here. Peter, get over here. There's a film up here called The Monster of Camp Sunshine. Could it be a horror nudie? That's exactly what it was.
Was this a basement? Was it dank? Was it mold?
Oh, it was, first of all, it was that dry humidity.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden you saw little tiny cuts on your hand that you never saw before.
Right.
All right? And in the center of the place, there was a overhead water pipe. It had burst, and it was still dripping on all the, and I was thinking, when you could tell the stink of these films rotting. And, I mean, this was a huge hole, too. This was under, I think, 10th Avenue. I mean, it went on for days, you know? And I remember looking at the titles there, and they were all in Cyrillic, so I figured, you know, but when the custodian even took us in this area, he says, oh, all the good stuff's over there. You don't want this shit. And it's the shit we wanted. And it was also at a time when Mike was seeing these other titles that weren't sexploitation. And I kept telling him, you need them, you need them. And I said, go beyond it. You call something weird. Go beyond it, go beyond it, go beyond it.
I'd be like Cotton Chicken.
That was the last film I took out of there. As we had the lights turned off, and we were going out, I look up and I go, oh, there's Cotton Taking Chicken Pickers. Now, it's a god-awful country western film, but it's the last film of Sonny Tufts and Greta Tyson and Tommy Noonan, none of which means anything to you people, but it meant something to me. And I just thought, it shouldn't die. It shouldn't go into a landfill. So we took it back, and then that's when Mike said, you know what, let me exploit it. Let's do the horror line with your name on it.
But you weren't part of the company at all. You were just going to launch it.
I never was. I was always just a kind of a silent partner in the
Yeah,
background.
no, you I mean, basically, like, you were the Frank doesn't, you know, toot his own horn, but he's probably one of the most knowledgeable cinephiles of all genres of anybody I've ever met. I mean, he likes movies from, you know, the 30s, he likes all different types of films, and having him on board was just a coup for, I mean, my cousin, besides the fact that they just got along really well, and yeah, it was just like a partnership made in heaven.
Well, Mike liked everything, though, right? Like, he would watch, like, obscure Tarzan movies. I mean, you weren't that hardcore, but,
Yeah,
like...
Well, yeah, but
That's
you
what
know,
they got along.
It was funny because, you know, for Mike, who, you know, sort of pioneered the sexploitation and the skin flick stuff, I mean, he was a fan of, like, the Blondie movies. He was always picturing that, they never came out, you know?
Bowery Boys.
Bowery Boys, oh, God, you know. And we used to love that. He was so excited when, this is so bizarre, I have no answer to it. But there was a movie called The Mark, I think it's The Mark of the Gorilla, a Jungle Gym film. And Mike had a version from TV, which meant 16 millimeter. I had a version off that was from 35 millimeter, from Sony. And it had two different opening narrations, and the original had Mel Blanc doing it. Here in the jungle, and yet they changed it for, well, that's the kind of stuff that Mike and I would go nuts over. We would talk about that, try to figure out what happened for weeks and weeks after that. Because Mike and I spoke every day on the phone, even when there was nothing to be said.
Now, you weren't in the picture yet.
No,
I know.
so...
But I met you at Michael's store.
Yes. What was funny was, I mean, I've always been interested in this kind of always, you know, like since the, I mean, and funny thing is, you know, I got introduced to psychotronic film. I was going to the psychotronic encyclopedia, seeing your basket case VHS, because it was like one of the first ones that came like out in those batches. So that kind of totally got me in that direction. So when I lived in New York City, I used to work for Michael Waldman at the psychotronic store, and that's where I met Frank. And any other number of jokers that we're still all friends with and whatnot. But I started writing about sexploitation films for a number of different magazines, and at that time there really wasn't much being written about that, and also there wasn't a lot of information out there, so it was kind of like, you know, deep archaeological digging. There was no internet, basically relying on like the AFI you know, Bible of film from like the 60s to find, you know, like, okay, what else is out there for...
In fact, that was my book.
Yep.
He used Xerox every damn page of that thing.
Yeah, we eventually got our own copy. I still have that Xerox one. Yeah, so I went to a Chiller Theater convention in 1993, which was the following year after you had been to the movie lab getting all those films, and I can't remember if you were at that convention or not, but definitely Dave Friedman was there, and I was going to be interviewing them both for this magazine I was writing for. And I remember walking up to the table, and I was just, you know, looking through VHSs at first, and Mike's like, "You like this stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, what are your favorites?" I'm like, "Oh, you know, I like Michael and Roberta Finley." And he just was like, "I think I'm in love." And he goes, "I shouldn't even be flirting with you. I'm very old." I'm like, "Well, whatever. I'm just going to interview you." And we just became friends, and over the course of a year, I mean, our relationship developed. But I have been a long time Something Weird supporter, and even I guess the first place I found out about Something Weird was from Kim's Video in New York City. So,
Which were all bootlegs.
Yeah,
Something Weird.
They were. Yeah.
They really were.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it was great. Mike used to we'd go to a convention, and Mike would walk around, and anytime he saw a bootleg, you know, someone selling varieties or teaser-rama, he would just go over and grab them and say, "These are mine, they're not yours," and that's that. No, nobody did. No, he was great. And he also, well, that's a smoking, I don't want to.
Okay, so let's go back to your story. We kind of left a cliffhanger there. So you have all these movies that you're rated from them. I love it. It's so cinematic. Someone should actually make like a movie that you get like Raiders of the Lost Vault. But so you have all these movies packed into a truck. What do you do? What's the next step?
Well, getting the truck, getting the stuff shipped to Seattle. Actually, I don't think they shipped to Seattle. They shipped to Los Angeles. Because Mike made a deal with a video company there for an extremely low rate. So low that they're going, we're not going to do this. And he says, well, I'll give you enough work. I mean, you'll be doing 100 more films. And they're going, oh, we'll do whatever you want. You know what I mean? And it was still analog back then. It wasn't digital. It wasn't any of the stuff we have today.
I mean, I am stuck with a garage full of 1-inch video masters that are obsolete.
Yeah.
But
he had a vault down in L.A. behind Jimmy. And
well,
Jimmy
it's all that
Maslin
stuff.
had a
It's
what?
in my house now.
Oh, what the vault
I
of
think
Jimmy?
that's how.
Yeah.
Jimmy from time to time.
Yeah, Jimmy Maslin owned the H.G. Lewis Library and the Doris Richmond films, and he was a longtime friend of Mike, so it was common sense that he would join forces, you know? And Jimmy had a vault in the back of his company, QC Video, and it was the most ramshackle thing. You couldn't find anything. Oh, it was horrible. I mean, and you're walking in there and you're waiting for it to collapse on you. And you know, for years, we couldn't find the films. And he had all these, let's say, unskilled laborers working for him, and they would take a can and just put it in any can. It never occurred to them that maybe you should put it in the can that's labeled correctly. So like for years we wanted to put out Dave Friedman's Starlet. And we couldn't find the whole film. And that happened with so many, you know. Mike, can we put this out on DVD? No. He says, we only have one reel. Well, where's the other 4? He goes, somewhere in a can in Jimmy's goddamn vault. And we keep opening up every goddamn can to find it.
Anyways, we're gonna wrap somebody else here.
We're slowly trucked up to Seattle.
Yeah.
We had like between Mike and a friend of ours, like they just go down to LA every once a month and just bring tons of films back. And it's now been organized. I mean, basically it's like everything, all the Dave Friedman films are together. You would think, I mean, it's not alphabetical. I think that was yeah.
And I think Starlet is trying to complete.
Yeah, and it needs to be stored.
Oh, yeah, well.
Just randomly.
You know, for a guy like me, the amazing thing was, you know, I didn't know about what Something Weird was until it showed up at like Tower Records and HMV under those amazing image releases, which I guess that was kind of the big next step into
Let me tell you about something. First of all, Mike loved sitting in front of his VHS deck and making these things. And to try to get him to go kind of out into the real world was a real problem. And I kept telling him, you know, we can't be a mail order company. Let's get it into a DVD thing. And I suggested Image, which fit on it right away, not knowing what they were getting. That's another problem. See, when they heard the word cult movie, they thought they were getting, Plan 10 from Madison, Plan 11 from Madison. They didn't think they were getting, and they saw, I think it was the Adult Adventures of Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, it's a version of Jekyll.
And all of a sudden they wanted nothing to do with this. They wanted to, and you know, and what they decided to do was the best possible thing for us. They took their name off it. So it was now Something Weird. And then they told, and I wrote all the copy for the DVDs and put in the extras. And they told me, make sure you put a warning label on everything. And, you know, for I think the first 20 I played it straight, and then I started making up things. You know, and they loved it.
Everyone owns at least one of these, right?
Yeah, they loved it.
Or the fun was actually reading the copy on the back.
Well, here's what was surprising. At first, like the first 20, I had a writing like, why are we going to put this one? And for that, then these were selling so well for Image that they didn't care. They just didn't care.
And there were only two titles that they drew the line with. It was Love Camp 7 and The Simple Dwarf. And they're like, we couldn't possibly put those. And The Big Snatch.
Well, there was a, what we decided we were going to call it the big, we had another name for it. They were, no, it's something good. You know, and they had, there was quite a controversy in the, in corporate headquarters. They, apparently they had one or more Christian conservatives on the board, you know. And they were the ones, they wanted the line killed. And according to two people that told us about it, I think probably Walker when he was still there. And there was another person. No, he wasn't there yet. But the guy said the meeting was, I'm pretty sure it was, but he said there was a meeting where the head buyer, the head salesman, I guess, came in and he put a bunch of titles on the table. And he says, these films, I don't like them either. They're dirty, they're rude, they're this, they're that. And he says, but they sell better than anything else we have, and that's our business! Pretty much ended it. And then, when they acquired the distribution rights to Criterion, they came up with a genius idea of putting that side by side. There would be a Criterion thing right next to Something Weird. And Criterion hated that. Here's the other thing we were told. Well, just Tower, remember there was once upon a time Tower Video, remember? The head buyer of Tower Video bought the quantity from us of all the Tower stores. And he bought so much from us that our discs were turning profit the day it was released, regardless of, I mean, the other companies were gravy. I mean, we made a fortune with that. I made more money through Something Weird than I did with any of the films. And we said to them, why? And they said, for some reason, they don't get returns. Now, usually, like, you know, they put out, remember they complained because they put out, they sold, what, 6,000 copies of, like, Mad Dr. Blood, I Only Speak of Blood, and whatever. You know, that's not bad. And then 3 months later, they got something like 3,500 back.
Oh, yeah.
And they were saying, we don't know what it is, but we don't get returns. I think it was because, unlike the VHS, which we were doing like the Dave Freeman collection, the dark stuff, for these, I pitched it all to a 15-year-old boy. He's got 20 bucks in his pocket, promising him tits and blood.
Actually, once you said, I interviewed you once, and you said tits and madness.
Okay, well, even better. All right, well,
I was going to call this panel Tits and Madness.
Yeah. And, I think they were just so happy with this stuff. They're not the kind who's going to take it back to the store. And they sold it.
What's funny is the difference between the Image product and, let's say, you know, Something Weird started, it was, you know, VHS, MOD, made on demand. Like, that was one of, you know, when Mike started the company, he's like, instead of like, you know, just having a few things and making thousands of them. We're going to have thousands of things and only make a few. So that's kind of the opposite. So basically, I mean, over the years, like, I think something weird's average catalog was like 2,500 titles, but we never had any, like, in a warehouse or in stock. It was always MOD. So he started that with me. And people were like poo-pooing and like, this is not a good idea, and blah, blah, blah. I was like, no, this is what works now. And then it ended up, you know, over the years, like Warner Archives started doing MOD. And now pretty much, I mean, even Image does MOD now. I mean,
Everybody does. Every
yeah.
DVD, I think, well, not most of them are all.
Yeah, but the interesting thing with Image is, you know, so we had one licensing period with them, and then the second one started up, and around that same time they changed ownership to RLJ, and all of a sudden it was like something.
What are your royalty statements?
Yeah, well, we didn't make, well, we got it, luckily we got advances, but the product was stopped selling, and wasn't in any
On the
retail
other hand,
spaces.
Lisa, they owe me $17,683
Wow.
for over a year, and they just ignore me. So,
Get-
you got a lawyer.
Lawyer, exactly. Yeah, so anyway, we realized at that point that, like, the business has changed, and also the demand for physical media had changed with, you know, I hate to say this, I mean, we all do it, but people can go on YouTube, and if you look hard enough, you can find movies, or any of the other, you know, bootleg things that are out there, and then things with streaming channels, which is great in some ways, like, you know, we have a wonderful relationship. That's funny, like Pullman Entertainment with their Pullman streaming, they have a whole series of something. But a lot of these places think that like movies are in the public domain, or it's like, well, it's on the internet, so I can take it for free. So it's really affected like small companies like something weird, and like lots of other, you know, smaller businesses. The whole game has changed. So, and you know, the elephant in the room we haven't even discussed is like, you know, my granny got sick, and then subsequently died. And before that had happened, you know, we had all discussed like what was like the future of the company, and it was agreed that like it didn't. I mean, even before Mike got sick, he was like, "I'm done with this. Nobody cares. All you genre fans suck. You know, nobody. I just put out like 20 new movies nobody's ever seen. Nobody cares. So fuck you." That was pretty much his attitude at that point. And we're gonna go do something else. I'm like, all right. And then you know what happened. And meanwhile, he passed away, and there was this giant archive left. And you know, I had no plans to, you know, invest any more money in the company to like store stuff. And you know, Frank's doing his own new projects now. He's done documentaries and films. I mean, actually, the last thing that we all worked on together before Mike got sick was the documentary that's Exploitation, and that's pretty much like a love letter to the company.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was really kind of our swan song.
You got more room than I did.
Exactly. So what's happened since then is, you know, first Mike was like, you know, when I'm gone, find somebody who's gonna like, you know, take this over. I'm like, yeah, good luck with that, because I mean, it's like a behemoth. You know, it's not just a handful of films. There's so many genres and subgenres, and then we have like vintage adult, and you know, it would be really difficult for like one entity to do that. So I was approached by Alpha Draft House about 3 years ago, and they were like, you know, maybe we want to do this. And then they saw like how massive the archive was, and because part of it is like the deal. If you're going to be something weird, you get to take all these thousands of films, and it's like a logistical nightmare for anybody, unless it's something that you really want to do is be a film archive. And they said, but what do you think about like us cherry picking, like, you know, some of the crown jewels in the something weird collection, and you know, having them be part of the American Genre Film Archive, and do some theatrical with them, and then do restorations and whatnot. So that's kind of the direction that something weird has been going in since Mike's death. Is that, you know, I'm working with other like-minded companies who are respected, who also will honor Mike's legacy and understand what something weird is about. So we've been very carefully curating the first films and letting them do restoration. So like our first one that came out was Zodiac Killer that Agfa put out, and I mean we got written up in that was like a major thing. And they've actually, Alamo actually been great to work with. Frank's been working with other companies and making commentaries on their projects. yeah, it's just so, I mean, we're keeping those alive, but it's just in a much different way than, you know, it's not as DIY as it was.
Two things. When we said we took movies out of Movie Lab, what we actually found in there, we thought we were going to go in and find prints. What we actually found were the negatives, meaning the picture negative and the sound negative. So that's very valuable because they're, you know, they don't deteriorate. It's perfect quality to carry to go forward now with HD restoration.
And that's also another issue. Actual, like, film elements have a shelf life. I mean, that's what I've discovered over the last 4 years of working, you know, hands-on with films. It's, you know, something we got 20, 25 years ago. It's not in the same condition it was at that time. It's like, you know, colors faded.
You know what the first one to get rid of the syndrome was that we found? Hollywood's World of Flesh.
I know, because I couldn't find that in the archive.
No, that was the first one. That was the first one that Mike opened up and went, whoa!
And what was interesting is I also discovered a pattern with like films that have like, you know, they do get vinegar syndrome, not just the company. There's a thing called vinegar syndrome that happens to films, and basically the film just starts to degrade and deteriorate, and eventually will just, you know, not exist there anymore. So what happened is, like, some of the films, like we got from the Sunny collection, which is like some of our oldest films from the 30s and 40s, those, like, you open the can and it's like, it's almost like smelling a bad salad, like you just get a whoop of this vinegary smell. And ones from Ferris family, which actually included like older, like burlesque and striptease movies, but also things from the 60s. And a lot of it had to do with them making them on the cheap, using cheap materials and processing, as well as like the way that they stored them. Yeah, exactly. And like the fact that like they kept it in like, you know, baked ovens on Cordova Street, you know, or you know, in San Francisco in like, you know, moist environments. So yeah, so we're dealing with those kinds of challenges because we love to like restore certain films, but it's like, you know, I send them to for, you know, one of these companies that I'm working with or whatever, and the, you know, report comes back like, you know, can't salvage this. But other things like the negatives, like I can say.
I got a funny story about once a year I'd go down to, usually in LA, and hook up with Mike, and we'd hang out and do some work on stuff. But I remember once he had a nitrate print, which, you know, you're not supposed to.
More of those.
Oh, I know. And, you know, you're not, you know,
Supposed to dispose of them.
you just don't put them at the lab like the lab we're using. We just said, it's okay for it. And it was Victims of Passion, a.k.a. race suicide. And the first 2 reels already shrunk. They started to shrink. But they could go through the telecine with Mike, hot fingers and his bottom feet like this. And he kept saying to me, don't interrupt. Don't interrupt. Don't interrupt. And he pressed it enough so the shrunken film went through and we got a movie out of it. Wow. The other thing I wanted to mention was when we were doing this, contrary to the way it is today, no one understood what these exploitation films were. I think certainly the critics didn't, the writers didn't. I think the only ones who ever understood it was maybe the 15-year-old kids that I was hoping were buying this. Because we used to get, like every issue of Video Watchdog slammed our films. Every issue.
But it's for the irony is probably.
Yeah, well, I remember a review for The Beast That Killed Women, about an ape in a nudist. If it was shot in 2 days, and I remember the reviewer going, well, it's not very cinematic. The film moves, and I'm thinking, what kind of asshole are you? and that continued through the whole time we were making this stuff. And that's why when Mike was, I can understand what Mike got interjected when, you know, you put out 20 films that no one's seen and nobody cares. And now, you know, films like action videos and everybody else, they put out the same film and everybody's going, oh, look what they have, But we were shit on nonstop back then.
Zodiac. I remember seeing Zodiac Killer on VHS when I was a kid. Even I thought it was a piece of shit. I can't believe it.
I was very surprised. That was the first one.
That was the first one. And then, well, the next one for ACTA, which was even more of a head scratcher, is That Pussy.
The back pussy buttons.
I have back pussy buttons, like the old pins, enamel pins, yeah, which it was actually supposed to be out by now. It's been ring for you to purchase, but it's gotten kind of moved up a little bit. We were hoping that Amazon was going to let us sell it on there, but they won't have anything to do with it. But no, I mean, but actually they're making some pretty interesting editorial decisions.
And I'll plug another one that's been coming out, because Rudolph Gray and I will be doing the commentary, I think on the 18th of this month, for a Lost Ed Wood film, Take It Out and Trade. And, yeah, I mean, it's not the Ed Wood you guys think of. This is, down in the gutter, dirty old Ed Wood, But it's a fascinating film, and when we got finished doing the audio for Violent Years, I mentioned them. I said, Rudolph has a friend that's got a beautiful 16 print of it, but the guy wants $5,000. And I mean, even that was too much for us, because we know we're not going to sell it. And nobody wanted it, and Joe from ACTA went, we'll buy it. And I think it was 3 weeks later, he sent me an email showing me the video clips, and it's a phenomenally beautiful looking film. Good film, but it's beautiful.
Take It Out and Trade has been making a little bit of, you know what I'm talking about? Recently it was a secret screening at Fantastic Fest, and Lisa was kind of caught in the eye of the storm with this. And I guess it kind of is reflective of the radically different culture we're currently living in.
Yeah, I mean, well, it was funny about the print, because I hadn't seen it yet either, and when the guys at ACTA told me, oh, we're going to do a secret screening, we're going to show Ed Wood Take It Out and Trade, which the other screening we were doing was Bat Pussy. I'm like, okay, you guys, pretty interesting choices, but I'm all for it, and, I guess I feel like, I feel really jaded, because nothing gets a rise out of me anymore at this point. So, anyway, we introduced this film at Fantastic Fest, and they said it was going to be a secret screening presented by AGFA and Something Weird. And they just said it was by a really well-known cult director. They hadn't been seen in 40, 50 years, blah, blah, blah. But there was a disclaimer. It said, this film should only be watched in a theater full of gutter-dwelling perverts. So that gives you a little bit of indication. All right, so anyway, people thought, I think they thought they were going to see Blade Runner or something. So 5 theaters, like 5 full theaters at Fantastic Fest are filled with people waiting to see the secret screening. And the first shot, and Joe Ziemba got right up there and basically said, okay, this probably isn't what you're going to expect to see, but it's a really important, significant film. It's Ed Wood, Take It Out and Trade. This film was it was his last film that he made. Was it? Oh, one of the last ones. Okay, I'm incorrect. Okay, so, now I'm not the Ed Wood expert.
It was the first one he made 10 years.
Was that?
Rudolph's last film was The Only House in London.
That was the other one I was going to say. But it did only get actually shown once, is what Joe was saying. Was that like I guess the film print came from the theater that it was had shown. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So basically, it got run through a projector once, and then got scanned. And the first scene, opening credits is just like a nude hippie chick gyrating and like coloring her nipples in the red lipstick. It's like, who is this guy? But also given the climate of what, I don't know if any of y'all have heard about this, but there had been some like big giant issues going on at Fantastic Fest about some past allegations of sexual assault and just basically like the festival not handling the situation very well. So there was already like people were a little bit inflamed about anything that was going to be controversial. And so, but Joe did do his introduction. We showed our movie, and not very many people walked out, but I guess there were a lot of unhappy customers because there wasn't any other movies that they could go see and whatnot. And basically, the last question we got asked was like, do you think this was appropriate to show this in the current climate? And because obviously they work for this company, are not really able to discuss it, but I considered it excellent. And I said, no, I think it was perfectly fine. I said, first of all, that there was, it was a very joyful film. I mean,
well, it was. One of the problems, though, that was the comical detective.
With a peeping Tom.
No, he beat the shit out of two women to get information. You know, one girl's a junkie and stuff, and he's going, no, tell me. I mean,
Henenlotter can't defend.
I mean, yeah.
No, what I compared, it's funny that Nick Stola's other guest who's here, I compared it to like a John Waters film, because it was so like over the top. I mean, it was more like, it was definitely renegade outsider cinema, and not, you know, I mean,
Not conscious.
no, not at all. I mean, the actress who got slapped around could have been like one of the characters in one of John's movies. Yeah, I mean, she's, well, actually,
Because the second woman that got slapped around was Anne Grey.
yeah, exactly.
He's good, he's really funny, and I wish he had been the main character.
Well, what surprised me, and kind of gave me like pause, is that like the thing a lot of the not a lot. Most people really enjoyed it. There was a lot of people who had reservations and things to say about it, and people who weren't there who had things to say about it. So, but there was like a scene where this silly peeping Tom detective is like bullying girls, and they're like about sexual assault. And I mean, I'm just sorry. And it's like, I guess in this day and age, with so many trailers and whatever else, that is considered an issue. But I don't want to have to second guess things, like what we put out there, you know. And that kind of like makes I'm kind of glad that we were involved in things when we were. And here's another example of what this is. About over 2 months ago, I got a notice from my credit card processing on the supplemented website, and they said, we don't want to have it. We've like terminated your account. And I'm like, why? You know, because you still have making movies, but it's network, but they didn't like the content. And I think that we're entering a time period where like there's it's just changed. I mean, when we look at it, when we look at something like website, people really like it because it's like full of information, but it's also like very tongue-in-cheek. There's like, I mean, it doesn't hold back. It's super abrasive, and you can't really function that way anymore.
Can I address that for a minute? I wrote maybe 90% of the reviews under any pseudonym I could think of. My favorite is Dribble Juice. I was Dr. Sex and Handsome Harry Archer, and I mean, yeah. But anyway, go look through. There's only one film, and I'll come to that in a minute. But go read anything, and you'll never see the word rape in any of the reviews, regardless of whether it exists in the content of the film. Because Mike and I made a deliberate decision that we were not going to sell films based on rape. And this is before the PC police took over. You'll never see the word rape.
Well, there was the word rape most times. Most times I had taken out.
Well, there was the only one that had rape in it was the, Shame of Patti Smith. Was it Shame of something Smith? Or?
Yeah.
And that's about, a girl who is raped and the consequences of society forcing her to get an abortion or something. I mean, it's a serious film. So that was acceptable. But you'll never see the word rape in any of the stuff I wrote, and I don't think any of the stuff
Well, that's, we had a whole vintage triple X section, and there were some titles like the website now, it's 4 times not there anymore. And it took the last 60 days to get back on the business, and a lot of changes to the website. But I was basically told that like by 3 different banks, it's like you need to totally like clean up your act, and which is a shame because I mean what we're known for is that like
being unclean.
And it's like then why so kind of it's kind of a catch-22 type of situation. So
just before because we are on. Does anyone have any questions before? If you want. I'm not getting up.
2 questions. First of all, to that point, were there any movies that you had to take down from the website because of the bank intervening? And second,
I took them off the website, but if somebody calls and wants to order, they can long.
And secondly, where did Bat Pussy come from? How was it found?
Oh, okay. Well, Bat Pussy, what was interesting about that whole time period was, we were mostly doing exploitation and sexploitation, and Mike had dabbled a little bit in vintage Triple X, like we had some Lucky Beavers series and maybe a feature here and there. Well, a friend of ours, Mike McCarthy, who did the movie The Sore Losers and Teenage Tupelo, who's also an underground artist, he lived down in Memphis, Tennessee, and he had heard about like a cache of films down there. Like they're all 16 millimeter storefront, what's called a storefront theater films, because they were run on 16 projectors with like folding chairs in a room. But this was at an actual theater that they found him in the back room, and he's like, "Do you guys want these?" And Mike's like, "I'll give you $1,000 for all of them." And it was probably a couple hundred. So here's my UPS number, pack them up, ship them here. So Mike's just sitting in the living room with our 16 projector, like trying each one out, and like some of them were like so scratched. I mean, like you could barely see an image on them, and and other ones were a little bit less so, but he was like making piles. This is the Kiefer, this one's good. And then he was like, "What the fuck is that?" I mean, he's just like, "Come here, you gotta see this." And first of all, like two of the most homely people you've ever seen, like are in bed, like just giving each other like, nasty pillow talk and berating each other. And then all of a sudden this girl in this really sad back girl costume hops out, leaves her, I think it was an outhouse, it was supposed to be her headquarters, and gets on a red hip hop, like one of those toy things she bounces around, and she just bounces down like the highway of like some rural area.
Walking would have been faster.
Yeah. She's shaking her hands like, what? And then all of a sudden she shows up later in the movie to like be involved in like a menage a trois with the.
It actually plays like an old avant-garde theater piece from the 60s.
It's performance art.
Oh, it is really.
Yeah. So that film was in that collection of those, and it's just been. I mean, we've never ever heard of or seen another print. It didn't have a title card, but it did have on the leader Bat Pussy.
I'll tell you another funny story about Mike. Anybody that knew him knew that he imbibed in a certain herb. Okay? And,
Highly functional.
he really was.
She said he was a highly functional body.
Yeah. But I got a frantic, he called me up one day just going, oh God, you're not going to believe what I found. Oh my God. He says, it's an actual gay snuff film. What? I'm telling you, this guy takes a knife and he starts putting it through the ass cheek of this other guy who's, oh my, Frank, I gotta send it to you. And I go, I don't send it. No, you gotta see it. So, I think it was called Hold Your Peace. And I got it, I put it on, and I called him up, I go, Mike, that's jam. He's smearing jelly on it. Not exactly a snuff film.
What's really interesting about the two of you, you are the keepers of the flame. You are the ones holding the fort and keeping Mike's memory alive. And that's pretty much what you agreed to do, and you've been doing it almost single-handedly. Right?
Mark didn't care about his legacy. He just was like, just let it all go and, go up and do, I'm also an artist and I do other stuff. He was like, just go live your life. And I just couldn't do that. And also, I invested 20 odd years of my life into something weird. I'm just as invested in it as, he was. That's what we did every day. I'll say it is definitely challenging to do this without him, because he definitely brought his own thing to the table. And what made, all three of us a really good team was, we all had our strengths, and I think that the one strength, he was the master of making a deal. That guy could hand somebody, like, magic beans and get, like, the most amazing stuff, and I don't have that skill, but I'm doing the best I can to just kind of, keep it moving.
I love your stories, Frank. I think we could all listen to them all day. But just tell me, just in a few words, anyways, what kind of guy was Mike? Like, what are your feelings about him? He seems like this permanent 12-year-old kid.
Be honest.
Well, he was complicated, okay? And to me, he was extraordinarily generous. And then I think I quit the company nevertheless like 3 or 4 times because of a dust-up where he would just go insane, anger. And then he'd be on the phone, oh, I'm sorry. But we got along great. I really can't say anything bad. I mean, he was a perfect partner, extremely generous. He paid me money for projects I didn't have anything to do with. In fact, I'll tell you how honest he was. I found out that one of our films was being bootlegged in the UK, the Varieties and Teaser-rama. How did I know? I never got a royalty check. I didn't question it. I didn't think that, oh, what happened? That he didn't send me one? No, I knew something was wrong. And it was Paul White who fucked us, but that's how honest he was. I mean, I'm looking at it going, uh-oh, stop the press. This guy's somebody's stealing our film. How did I know? I didn't get a royalty check. So that tells you the honesty he had, and he was very generous. He was so much fun to hang out with. He really was. I mean, every time he'd come in New York, anytime I was out there, we had to get some kind of.
Those pink, the baby holiday.
Oh, that's it. Okay, yeah. And it was just fun. We spoke every day, but we always looked forward to seeing each other in the fall at Chilla, or when he was in New York, or when I would go out to LA. It was always fun. And I would call him and say, "Listen, I'm going out to LA for this." He goes, "Okay, I'll come down." Just for the pure fun of it, So it's a great friend that I lost. It was real, and in fact, it was so difficult. The first Chiller I went to, which I guess was the 25th, because I've lost a lot of people in my life, and there's a certain thing that happens. I remember walking into it, and I look in the lobby, and I see him. Oh, wait, oh, that's not him. And that must have happened 4 or 5 times, where I saw him, and I'm going, oh, no, it's not. In fact, the person I thought was him really didn't even look like him. But there's that, the expectation that...
He was also a huge personality.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, absolutely. And I think...
He made an impression on anybody who
Yeah,
met him.
yeah, no, he was really something,
Well, I love the whole romance. I mean, your connection was based on trash movies, but that doesn't sustain a marriage or So what was it that made you stay?
Oh, well, I mean, obviously, we were together for about 20 years total, and yeah, I mean, we had that in common, but we had so many other things. Like, we both, Mike was also, other than movies, he collected crap. He was like the biggest hoarder, but not like junk. I mean, really good stuff. And he could get people to give him anything, and we had warehouses full of stuff. And
well, the house looked like a museum.
Yeah, it's like a pop culture.
It really
but I
was.
also am the same way. So between the two of us, it was like enabling each other constantly. Just really, I mean, there was a handful of people that Mike loved in his life, and Frank was one, and I know I was one. Dave Friedman, Jimmy Maslin, and Kevin Clement from Chiller Theater, and one other friend, Jimmy. Yeah, and that was it pretty much. I mean, he liked other people, but it was like we were his core group, and his children. I mean, and he was a great dad. He had
Tell him about marketing the band. What he did for that.
Oh, it was funny. Well, he actually put something weird stuff on hold for about 3 years when my stepson turned like 13 or 14 and started a band. And Mike, I don't know if any of you know this, but before he did something weird, he was actually like a punk rock band manager with like Dead Kennedys and TSOL and a bunch of Flipper, I think a few other bands as well. And he went on the road and did all that stuff for, I don't know, most of the 80s. Up until he started doing something weird.
If anybody gets the documentary Hype, which is about the punk rock scene.
In the channel, yeah, he's in that. Yeah, so anyway, he's like, well, I'm going to go manage my son's band, and you run the company for a while. So it was hilarious because literally he'd just get in this like church van. He ended up getting like a 15-passenger white van with the, like 4 kids, loaded up the equipment, and I wouldn't see him for 3 months. And it was, and then, we went to college, and he's like, oh, okay, I'm going to work again. Yeah.
And he shot videos with them, and he actually produced a couple of the records. And
everything. That band never would have gone anywhere if it wasn't for him.
And here's the first album. They were all under 18. The first album was called Boner.
You know, we're running out of time. We've run out of time, and I was going to end it on Boner because it was just after long. But okay, after Boner. What?
Frank, you mentioned a movie earlier. It was one of the first ones you mentioned. I don't know if it was Mark of the Gorilla or something like that. You said Tommy Noonan. Were you referencing Manhunter's Tom Noonan?
No.
Or a different
No,
Tommy
I'm
Noonan?
referring to a dreadful comic. But he had the distinction of starring opposite Jane Mansfield in Promises, Mamie Van Dorn in Three Nuts in Search of a Bolt, and Marilyn Monroe in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
Awesome.
So, okay, and then Greta Tyson with his last film, Time Big and Chicken Business. Terrible film, but I'm glad I saved it.
Told you, encyclopedic knowledge.
Frank, just say Boner one more time. So
Boner.
And I've been leasing upstairs and on tables. Go see them in Jackson. We're kissing in the back tomorrow from 11 till 4. Thank you, everybody.